Good evening, everybody. If you would like, you can open up your Bibles to Judges chapter 8. We're in the Bible period of the Judges. Can anybody name me the cycle of the Judges? What's step 1? Apostasy. Step 2? Oppression. Step 3? Cry out to the Lord. Step 4? God raises up a deliverer or a judge. Step 5? Peace. Step 6? Apostasy. We start the cycle over again. Very good. Can anybody name the judges that we've talked about thus far? Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon. And now we're about to look at another one that is technically not a judge, but we list him with the judges because of the details that are given about him. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. So what do you remember about Gideon?
God called him the mighty man of valor.
That's right.
He calls himself weak and of the least tribe.
That's right. Very good. Remember any details about who's the enemy? Midian. How many years of oppression? Yeah, good. All right. I'm helping you out here a little bit. So what was significant? What do you remember any detail-wise? If you were to remember one detail about how he delivered Israel from Midian, what do you think of? Yeah, 300 men. And by that 300, he routed the Midianites and overtook. So the last thing that we kind of looked at here, you notice, and I want to come back and pick up on this because it's a theme. By the way, have we, I don't know that we've hit on it yet because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but what is the theme of the book of Judges? If you were to sum it up in one verse or one phrase from a passage, what is it? Every man does what's right in his own eyes. All right, there was no king over Israel at that time, so every man did what was right in his own eyes. This idea of there was no king over Israel is significant. Yes, they don't have a king. Who is supposed to be their king? God. If God is your king, do you do what's right in your own eyes? No, but even God wasn't their king. And I think that that's what we're seeing in this. So I want you to go back and look in chapter 8 at verse 22 and 23. The men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your sons and your grandsons also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. We want you to be our king. We want you to rule over us because you gave us some physical relief here." Gideon says what in verse 23? That's right. Now that's a great answer, isn't it? That's a fantastic answer. Let's keep that in mind. Let's keep that in mind as we move down. You got anything you want to add in the way of review? So we do see after Gideon ran the Midianites out that it was quiet for 40 years. It was quiet from the hand of an oppressor. But what's taking place during this time? We got a little hint. What?
There's still false worship.
Yeah.
Idols.
Yes. What type of false worship do we see even from this text?
Where the earrings.
Yes. What did he make out of it? An ephod. And then it says that from that, all of Israel played the harlot there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his house, verse 27. So, what was Gideon's nickname? Jerubbaal. And what does it mean? Yeah, something with Baal. Either plead for Baal, or I think that the way that it was used here is one who contends with Baal. And so if that's the way it's used, it's not a bad nickname. It's a pretty good nickname to have. So in verse 29, Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Gideon had how many sons? And how in the world do you have 70 sons? You have lots of wives. Does that sound good or bad? It does not sound like he's adhering very closely to the instruction that God will give later for the kings, and even I think what we see in the scripture at this point. Now, how many times have we seen polygamy work out really well? No, we haven't. And it's not going to work out well here either. You notice in verse 31, one of his concubines, a concubine that he had, who was in Shechem, bore him a son, and they called his name what? Abimelech. All right, so Shechem is going to be right here in Manasseh's territory. And Abimelech, let me get over here. Abimelech, does anybody know what the name Abimelech means?
My father is king.
That's exactly right. Very
I
good.
wrote it down that way.
That's wonderful that you remember that and wrote that. That's great. All right. So that was a title that was given to a lot of the Philistine kings. You know, like Pharaoh is a title given to the Egyptian kings. Abimelech was a title given to a lot of the Philistine kings. My father is king, therefore I'm king. What's ironic about that Gideon would name his son Abimelech? Yeah, they said, we want to make you king. He said, I will not be king. The Lord is your king. And then he names his son, my father is king. So that throws a little doubt. Here's something that was brought up in the class or after the class last time that I think is important. When you look at the judges, God is using these men. But what we're doing is we're getting a snapshot of what life was like during this period of time. And even the heroes of this time, not everything they do is that righteous and God. Think about Samson I know we haven't got to Samson yet. When you think of Samson, good guy or bad guy?
He was good, but he fell to the temptation of a woman.
That's exactly. So we have good and bad mentioned about him in that, with really no commentary on either one. Like, oh, don't do this, do this. It just gives us a snapshot of his life. The book of Judges is giving us a snapshot of what's going on in Israel at this time. And there are some good things like Gideon here trusting the Lord in different ways. But then you also look in Gideon's life, and he's got all of these wives. He's making an ephod. There's some problems that are going on here as well. And so we're just getting a snapshot here and noticing that. Anything anybody would like to mention up through verse 31? Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, did Gideon make the ephod be like an idol? Or what do you think is?
I don't know. I don't know. Here's the thing. I can't see that it was good that he built an ephod, regardless. I mean, I don't know what you would build an ephod for except to take on a role, or at least in some way that God hadn't given you. And so it becomes a stumbling block to him and his household in some way. I don't know if that was his intention when he made it or not.
The way it's worded there in verse 27, it says he made it and then he set it up in his city.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of sounds like it was not the best of intentions.
Yeah.
Or anything else.
It seems like it, yeah. Yeah. It does not seem like it was wise move, regardless. Yes.
Could also, like as we go through the judges, even though we have good, then we have a whole lot of bad. But couldn't a lot of this relate back to Levites not actually teaching what their responsibility for all the kingdoms, that they were supposed to teach the people God's word? And if they was doing a wholeheartedly effort to the people, I think a lot of this stuff wouldn't have happened. It may still happen, but I think it'd been more on their mind of what the Word of God told them to do and not to do, where if they was just putting it out just a little, it wouldn't be on their mind, so they'd be more apt to fall away from God's
I think that's exactly right. So the book of Judges starts off with Joshua's generation's faithful and all those who outlived him, but then the next generation did not know God nor his mighty works. Somebody wasn't doing their job teaching it. Parents or the Levites, both,
Right.
were not conveying that. Very good. So he's got many wives, but it says his concubine in verse 31. What's the significance? What's the difference between a wife and a concubine? It's a wife of lesser status. In other words, she doesn't have full rights in that. The children are, I don't know if illegitimate, that wouldn't necessarily be the term, but of lesser status as well. And you'll see that play a significant role in this story.
Well, I think usually the wife, the person that they marry, and then the ones after that, unless she dies, when they take additional spouses on, they're all concubines in that order.
Not exactly. You think about Solomon, and Solomon had, I just went blank on it. How many wives did he have and how many concubines? Yeah, it was like 600 wives and 400 concubines, or I don't think I've got the numbers right there. 700 wives and 300 concubines. Thank you. And so you could have a second, third, fourth wife, and a concubine was even lower status than that. But it was generally the first one that you married. Many times had the legal rights in as far as the birthright. The son of the first wife many times had the birthright. Okay, so let's continue on with this story now. Abimelech is a son of a concubine. Now, Gideon died, verse 32, at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father, in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And so it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, that all the children did what? All the children of Israel did what? Back to cycle 1, apostasy. And so they're serving the Baals, and they made a god called Baal Berith. Now, anybody have a footnote? What does the word Baal mean? Master, Lord. It had the idea of God in that. So you'll see a lot of Baal Peor, the Lord or Master of Peor. So this is Baal Berith. Anybody know what Berith means? Covenant. Whoa, where did they set this God up at? Where did they set this idol up at? That's a good guess. If you look down at verse, verse 4, what's that? No, it's not Jerusalem. It's, I'm trying to put this together here. So verse 4 mentions the temple of Baal Berith. And I'm trying to back up here where you can see Shechem. Shechem. All right, so Shechem is going to be right here. What do you remember about Shechem? Anything you remember about Shechem? It's where the promises were made. All right, it's where Abraham first received the promise of the land. It's where Joshua, when he conquered the land, brought the people, and the covenant was reaffirmed. The covenant, what was the basis of the covenant?
I'll be your God, you will be mine.
That's right. And so how many other gods were they supposed to have?
One.
In the covenant. The very foundation of the covenant was that the Lord was to be their only God. They made that covenant in Shechem, and now here they are setting up the master, the Lord, Baal, Berith of the covenant. And it's not Yahweh. Do you see the irony in that? And do you also see how terrible this is? That in the very place where they first made the covenant, they're setting up a false God and calling it the God of the covenant. In this.
I believe if you look at historically, it's a rock. It's a carved out image.
Which is also interesting because Shechem there, remember the covenant was, they set up a bunch of rocks and plastered them and wrote the covenant on there. All right. Anything else you want to say about Baal Berith? All right, verse 34, the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God. The whole idea of the covenant was to be remembered. But they forget the real Lord of their covenant, and they make Baal Berith. And so, verse 35, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in accordance with the good that he had done. So they forget the covenant, and they serve an idol. And then the second thing is they did not show kindness to Gideon's household. And then chapter 9 is going to give us the account of them not showing kindness to Jerubbaal's household. Anything you want to mention before we get into chapter 9?
So, but this would go back, not that Gideon was condemned for it. I mean, we see there in the end where he was considered for doing good. But this idol worship that is has begun here, still goes back to him setting up that ephod, you think?
I don't know.
I mean, it kind of started there.
Yes, I think so. So what we see is we see them playing, it says they played the harlot with the ephod that he set up during his lifetime. And then after his death, it seems that Baal Berith became a principal idol that they serve in the area. Yeah, so it did kind of, at least that apostasy started even during his lifetime. All right, chapter 9. Colby, would you take verses 1 through 6?
Okay. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, Please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and bone. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, because he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem.
I'll give you first shot at this since I
Okay.
stole all the thunder.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will tell you what I think about it, and then I'll let Lonnie tell you the real story. So Abimelech has went to Shechem to his mother's brothers, because remember, his mother is the concubine of Jerubbaal, or Gideon. So he goes to her and her family, and he speaks to them, and he tells them which one would be better for all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal, which would be his, I guess you could say maybe half brothers or partial brothers, or just one to reign over you. Now remember that I am your own flesh and bone. That would be because his mother was from Shechem. So they think about it there in verse 3, and they kind of look at one another there and say, well, he is right. I mean, he is part of our family. So they agree to let Abimelech rule over them. And not only do they agree to it, but what do they do in verse 4? Yeah, they give him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, which is a false god. And he took that money and hired worthless men, a mob, basically, to follow him and be his followers, his henchmen, so to speak. So he goes to his father's house back at Ophrah, and basically what happens there is there's a rock there. We were talking about rocks a while ago. On one of those rocks, it says that verse 5, right? Mm-hmm. He killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. That basically means that he systematically executed them there on that rock in Ophrah. And all the men of Shechem gathered together there at all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. So it seems like when they gave him this money, to me, that they're behind this execution of the 70 sons. And it's at this point that they say, all right, we're going to follow Abimelech and the false idols that go along with it. We're just totally going to leave God. Any comments or anything I missed, Lonnie, that you would want to say about that?
Just picking up little things in here that's interesting to me. So going back to chapter 8, where they ask Gideon to rule over, and Gideon makes this very noble statement saying, I will not rule over you, nor shall my sons rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. But then you notice how Abimelech words this to the men of Shechem. Is it better, which is better for you, that all 70 sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that just I reign over you. So were they reigning over them at this point? It seems, I don't know. I don't know if he's making that up or if they are or what's going on here. But you would think they would say, no, wait a minute, no. Gideon was very clear that his sons are not going to rule over us. The Lord's going to rule over. But that's not where they're at. That's not where they're at. They're looking for some type of leadership over them in an earthly way. And here's this. Abimelech, I'll say this. Austin argues with me about this because we've taught the young people here when naming the judges. Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Abimelech, told Jerajah. And he said, don't put Abimelech in there. He's not a judge. And that's true. He's not a judge. He's a usurper. God did not appoint him as a deliverer over God's people. This is a story interjected in here of what it's like when men do what's right in their own eyes. And they raise themselves up as tyrants over people. And Abimelech, that's what he's doing here.
It's a perfect example to me of how the starting point can be good, and then a little bit of sin can grow and grow, and it can take you just totally away from. I think you've said it before. It can take you as far as, what is that statement you made before, that sin will take you as far as.
Sin will take you further than you meant to go and cost you more than you meant to pay.
Right. This is a perfect example of that.
Well, Abimelech, he's a very evil and convincing person to his brothers, because there's been a lot of families that are actually in ruler leadership of genealogy. But he turns the situation, instead of, even if one was picked, he's making out like all 70 of them are going to immediately take power. So do you want them or do you want me? So he convinced them with a falsehood to actually overthrow the leadership to be crowned king, because he manipulated the people's mind instead, and even the Levites, the high priest, didn't even go to God to ask, what do we need to do with Abimelech?
Yeah, we don't see anything about, you mentioned the Levites earlier, nothing about the Levites at this point. We'll see a story later that's not favorable towards the Levites, but nothing about the Levites, nothing about the high priest here, nothing about asking God's counsel on anything. You're right. Just doing what's right in their own eyes. Continue to notice how idolatry plays a part in this. Where did they get the money to pay these thugs to go execute Gideon's family? From the temple of Baal Berith. Yeah, they're in Shechem. And so if we look at Shechem, and this is a more modern photo here. Shechem is nestled between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And you'll remember that ancient Shechem, right there at the center, that was the place where when Joshua came and brought the children of Israel after conquering the land, that they did the blessings and the cursings. Does anybody remember which mountain was designated for blessings and which was designated for cursing? Yes. Ebal curses. All right, good. Hold on to that thought. It's interesting as it plays into this story here. But so Shechem is there. Now, somebody got away. Not all the sons died. Jotham got away. Jotham got away because he hid himself. And so all the men of Shechem, verse 6, gathered together in all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree and the pillar that was there in Shechem. Now, when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim, like right here, looking down on Shechem. And by the way, the acoustics of this place must be phenomenal. And it's been tested out, and it seems to be phenomenal, because we have large gatherings there on a couple of occasions where everybody was able to hear what was going on. So on this occasion, Jotham is going to stand on Mount Gerizim and call down to the men of Shechem, and they're going to hear him. And here's what he says. So he went and stood on Mount Gerizim, and he lifted his voice, and he cried, and he said to them, and listen carefully to this I don't know what you call it, this speech. We'll call it speech. Listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth and anointed a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil with which they honor God and men and go and to sway over trees? Then the tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over trees? Then the trees came to the vine, and they said, you should come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go and sway over the trees? Then all the trees came to the bramble, said, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out from the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. All right, let's stop right there. When you think, and think as an ancient Israelite here, when you think of an olive tree, what do you think of? Good or bad? Good, yes. Productive, useful. When you think of a fig tree, good or bad? Good, productive, useful. When you think of a grapevine, good or bad? Good. When you think of a bramble? No. So what are the trees doing here?
Ruling over the people.
Yes, they start off and say, we want somebody to reign over us, and they start with who would be the most obvious choice. Who do you think that represents? Gideon. The people came to Gideon and said, you rule over us. And Gideon said, no. All right, and so when they come to Abimelech, where are they at? They're at the bramble. they're at the one that's nothing but a nuisance and a pain, that's not useful. And what does the bramble say? He's willing to accept it in a way. But notice this, there's something at the end here. If in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Devour the ones who are asking him to be king. Hold on to that thought. Jotham is going to explain it to us. Now, therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have raised up against my father's house this day, and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal, and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. Now, he already lets us know here, how does he think that they've dealt with his family? Not in sincerity and truth. That's right. But if not, verse 20, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. And then Jotham ran and fled, and he went to Beer, and he dwelt there for fear of Abimelech, his brother. All right, this is a curse that's pronounced here on them. And the curse is basically this. All right, if you acted sincerely in this, then I hope everything goes really well for you. But if not, then I hope this relationship destroys both of you. You destroy each other in this relationship. And then he flees and runs away. And it's interesting, too, that he mentions let fire come out. Hold on to that thought as well. Any thoughts? Anybody, you got anything you want to mention through verse 21? Anybody else?
I was just thinking back when Ben came there, he went to the mother's side of the family.
Yes.
And they sought no counsel with Gideon's part.
You're right.
And then you see it here come to pass, and Jotham let them know what's happening.
That's right. That's right. Anybody else? All right, let's see what happens here. You want to take through 22 through 25?
After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who aided him in the killing of his brothers. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them along that way. And it was told to Abimelech. So the previous passage here that Lonnie read about this conflict that's going to begin to occur between Abimelech and the people of Shechem, we see that begin to come true here. God makes sure that it comes through because he sends this spirit of ill will to come in between them. Now that doesn't mean all the people of Shechem we see here. There's still some of the men of Shechem who are following Abimelech, you see. So the ones that are not following Abimelech, they are going to deal treacherously with Abimelech and then the people of Shechem who helped him to kill the brothers. So the men of Shechem, the good men of Shechem, are going to set an ambush against Abimelech in the tops of the mountains. And in the next section that we look at here, we're going to see this. We're going to see the significance of that when a new character we're introduced to, Gael, is going to see these men coming out from the tops of the mountains. So they're up in the tops of the mountains, the men of Shechem, waiting, and they're robbing all who pass by along the way. And Abimelech finds that out.
What's interesting to me about this section is we get a little behind-the-scenes look at how God is working. Here's wickedness. Does God overlook the wickedness? Well, it would appear so. If you're, Jerubbaal's family were all murdered, and here it just looks like Abimelech is now king, and everything's hunky-dory for a while until it's not. And you think, well, they just can't get along, and so now there's conflict here. Well, that kind of makes it hard on everybody. But who's behind this? God is. God reigns in the kingdoms of men. God's in control. And so we're looking at this and we're saying, man, these people can't get along. There's God's punishing sin here in this conflict that's taking place. And from just looking at it from a human perspective, it may just look like, well, here's social unrest. But God's using that social unrest to accomplish his purposes in punishing sin. So we'll follow that as we continue to go through here. So imagine living in this area now. You can't travel safely because robbers will come out. Boy, things have gotten a lot better since Abimelech is reigning over us. By the way, I think that's one of the lessons that we learn through both Judges and the Kings is that who's supposed to reign over them? God. They're not satisfied with God reigning over them. They want a man to reign over them. How does it go when a man reigns over them? Not well. And it can't even travel safely now because of this. And it's Abimelech's responsibility to provide safety here, and he can't do it. So then verse 26 says, now Gael, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. It's like, hey, we need somebody to help us here. And so they went out into the fields and gathered grapes from the vineyard and trod them and made merry. And they went into the house of their God. By the way, just notice, we're just passing telling this story. They go out, they harvest grapes, they make wine, and they go where? The house of their God. Just normal daily occurrence now in the days of the judges to go into the house of their God. And they ate and drank and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech and who is Shechem that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor and the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? If only this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And so he said to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. By the way, he's not really talking to Abimelech. He's just saying that like, he's talking big right now, you know? And so increase your army and come out. Now Zebul, who he just spoke ill of, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his anger was aroused, and he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly and said, take note, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and they are here fortifying the city against you. Now therefore get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall come to pass when the sun is up in the morning that you shall arise early and rush upon the city, and as soon as he and his people and the people who are with him come out against you, you may do to them as you find opportunity. So now we have a man talking big, and most of the people seem to be supportive of him, but the ruler of the city, who's still somewhat loyal to Abimelech here writes to Abimelech or sends to Abimelech and says, hey, you've got a problem here. We've got an uprising. Come and take care of it. So that sets us up for verse 34. And anybody have anything they want to add through verse 33? You take 34 through wherever you want to stop at.
Okay. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. When Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance to the city gate, Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, you see the shadows of the mountains, as if they were men. So Gaal spoke again and said, see, people are coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. So Abimelech and his men come and they hide and lie in wait, waiting on Gaal and his men. And Abimelech divides the men that he has there into 4 companies as they lie in wait there in ambush. So when Gaal comes out, remember he had already, as a figure of speech, opened his big mouth. He was using the wine that he drank to help him talk big. He comes out and he's standing in the entrance to the city gate. And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose up and they come to him. And when Gaal sees them coming, he looks and he says to Zebul, who is Abimelech's officer, look, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebul said to him, you see the shadows of the mountains as if they were men. So he says, they're really not men. But Gaal speaks to him again and says, no, there are people coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. So he sees Abimelech's men coming from basically all different directions here. In verse 38, Zebul said to him, now, where indeed is your mouth, with which you said, who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Are not these people whom you despised? Go out, if you will, and fight with them now. So once Zebul sees that Gaal understands, yes, these are Abimelech's men coming to me to take care of business, coming to fight with me, he says, okay, now where's all of that talk that you were doing? You're going to have to back it up now. And in 39, so Gaal went out, leading the men of Shechem, and fought with Abimelech, and Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. So this fight, this talk that Gaal did is not going to work out very good for him as we go on into verse 41 and farther. But any comments or questions up through verse 40? And Lonnie, I'll let you take 41 on if you.
One thing that's interesting to me, verse 37, just noticing this, when you can't tell the details of an event without mentioning idolatry in it, it gives you an idea of what the culture is like. And so here, even as he said, no, people are coming, and look over there by the diviner's terebinth tree. I mean, just everywhere you look, you see idolatry, it seems, in this time. This is what happens in the days of the judges when men do what's right in their own eyes. So they go out to fight. And it does not go well for Gaal and his company. They are driven off. And verse 42 says, and the next day, the people went out to the field, and they told Abimelech. And so Abimelech divided his men into 3 companies and lay in wait in the fields and attacks them. And Abimelech rushes into the city and kills those who are in the field, and then takes the city. And when he comes into the city, he begins to demolish it and to sow it with salt. So how's it going for Shechem? Who said, yes, we want you to rule over us. Yes, we'll give you the money out of our temple to go kill your brothers. And you remember Jotham's prophecy. All right, if you did that in sincerity, then let it go well. If not, let fire come from Abimelech and destroy the men of Shechem. And now Shechem is destroyed. However, notice in verse 46, when all the men of the tower of Shechem heard that, they entered the stronghold of the temple of their God, of the god Berith. All right, so they run to the tower and the temple there of their God. And it was told Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. So Abimelech went to Mount Zalmon. Anybody have a footnote on Mount Zalmon? Anybody know anything about it? Yes, sir. It's unknown. There is high speculation. It really is unknown. We don't have another reference that gives us any clue. However, many scholars believe that Mount Zalmon is Mount Ebal. Is another name for Mount Ebal. We can't lock that down, but the majority of scholars that I've read feel like it's Mount Ebal. And he says, let's go up to Mount Zalmon and do what? What? Yeah, that's right. Let's go get some timber. Everybody come and get timber. And so they come and get timber and they bring it down. And what do they do with that timber? Yes, they stack it around this stronghold, this tower. And then verse 49, they set the stronghold on fire, and all the people of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. Let fire come out of Abimelech and destroy the men of Shechem. And literally, that's what happened. And if Zalmon is Mount Ebal, the mount of curse, Jotham's curse was fulfilled literally from the mount of curses. And that's what happens to Shechem. Yes?
Was it a curse or was he a prophet?
Yeah. I would say that he has to be speaking this prophetically with this type of accuracy. And so either God honored his curse or God put those words in his mouth to curse and fulfill it. Now, wait a minute. There was another part of the curse. What was the other part of the curse? Yeah, and that he would be destroyed as well. So now verse 50. Abimelech went to Thebez, and which is going to be right up here, just north of Shechem, and he encamped against it and took it. Boy, this sounds like a great king, doesn't it? He's just coming in and destroying all the places that he was reigning over. There was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and women and the people of the city fled and shut themselves up in the tower and went up to the top of the tower. And Abimelech came as far as the tower and fought against it and drew near the door of the tower. What's he going to do to the tower? Burn it. It worked before. It worked in Shechem. Destroyed all of it. So he goes to do that again. But what happens here is, as he drew near, verse 53 says, a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. And so as he goes near the tower, a stone is dropped on his head, crushes his head. By the way, lock this story into your mind, this event, because this will come up later in a reference when we get to the United Kingdom. But crushes his skull, but he doesn't die immediately, but he realizes that it is a fatal wound. And so he calls for his armor bearer and he says, kill me. Finish me off. Why? He has a reason. Oh, it would be so disgraceful to be killed by a woman in battle. And please don't let that be known. So my armor bearer killed me so they won't say that. So you know what I really like to remember about Abimelech? My favorite thing to remember about Abimelech was he was killed by one. He was a rotten guy. And I had no problem remembering that he was killed by a woman. And I don't think God has any problem with it either. I think that's the reason why God recorded it for us in here, so that we would know that.
The story begins with a stone, ends with a stone.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that. Begins with a stone and ends with a stone. Very good. Very good. So, verse 56 says this. God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem God returned on their own head. And on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. And so God didn't forget. Now, if we just look at this from human eyes, what we would see is just social unrest. What a terrible event that's taking place here. God was orchestrating that. He was working that. I don't know that God doesn't work that way today. I think that he probably still does. And he sees what's going on, and he brings it upon the head of the wicked. All right, we're out of time. Thank you for your good attention and good comments. We'll pick up there with the next couple of judges, which we'll be able to cover pretty quickly. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.